How did you feel when you first came here? You come off the NXT roster, you're in the system. What was your main concern going out, just as far as creating a persona, work style? Did you just remain who you were from the indie scene? What was your MO to get over and strike a nerve with the people?
Well, so when I got to NXT, I was really, I had no idea what or who I would be, really. You know, I got signed, but I was never given an indication of what the plans were, if there were plans. As a matter of fact, when I got signed, Canyon Seaman, who's, Triple H's kind of right-hand man with the recruiting talent, called me and said, well, we're going to hire you, but I was told to let you know not to get your hopes up as far as Raw and SmackDown goes because, you know, as you're aware, you're maybe not somebody who Vince McMahon would gravitate towards, but you're going to get your chance in NXT like everyone else. And my exact words back to him were, well, I look forward to the challenge. And he said, well, I thought that's what you'd say. And then I got to NXT, and those words were, you know, always kind of resounding in my head, like, don't get your hopes up, don't get your hopes up. But I didn't know who I would be. I had singlets made because I figured, well, WWE, you know, you got to look nice and clean, and that wasn't me. That was never me. And then, I've told that story before, but one time at the Performance Center when we're getting ready to do these ID shoots, which is just like us standing in the ring with them kind of just shooting around us and getting some footage for like the entrance video and whatnot. Enzo Amore, at that point, I didn't know I didn't know my name. I didn't know what my character would be. I didn't know nothing. Enzo Amore saw me in my singlet. Was like, well, what is that? That's not you, you know? Until you're told otherwise, just be you. So I'm like, oh, all right. So I put on some shorts. I cut off the sleeves off the T-shirt I had on at the moment, and I turned it inside out because it was a Guns N' Roses T-shirt, which obviously I couldn't wear for that stuff. But, Finn Balor at the time was paint, the demon stuff that he does. He had some body paint that he was using. So I splattered some paint. I splattered the word fight on the shirt just so it looked like something. And then I went and did the ID shoots, and Chris Chambers, who's kind of overseeing the whole thing, looked at me and said, oh, that kind of looks cool. That's different. I'm like, and that right away, and I've never gotten the chance to tell Chris that, but that gave me such a confidence boost because I was walking into an entire new environment, a new place, and as confident as I've always been with my abilities, at that point, I had no idea what they expected of me. And it was always my dream to work for WWE, so I was really... I'd say those ID shoots that day actually was probably the most nervous I've been in my WWE run because I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. When he said, that looks different, that's cool, it gave me such a confidence boost, you know, and I'm really thankful for Chris for that. It was years ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday. So then we did the ID shoots, and I fully expected a week later to get a call from whoever, Bill DeMott, who was running the Performance Center at the time, or maybe even Triple H, saying, well, what the hell were you wearing? But I didn't. In fact, I got a call later saying, hey, so I'm with the creative department, and we're working on your look. You want to see what we've got? And when they sent it through, I was wearing shorts and a cut-off T-shirt. And I'm like, man, that's me, So that's when I realized I got here because of who I was, and they want me to be me. And I've always stayed true to that. Of course, there's, little aspects of who I am that I've played up at different times. And, like the last few months, I've been more about being entertaining and this and that, but I feel like I've shown all kinds of shades of my character from the time I showed up with Cena to now, whether it's be a badass who can fight and won't give up, to being, a more entertaining character, to being, maybe somebody who's not as courageous as he should be. But I feel like I can make all those work. So I've always stayed with the same base, which is myself, and then I just turn up different aspects when it's time, and I think it's been working out pretty good.
That was a great piece of advice that Enzo Amore gave you. He said, hey, until they decide to tell you who you are, just be yourself.
Yeah.
Because that's who I was, just turned up. It took me a while to find that.
I mean, I've heard you say that in interviews countless times, too. You're just you with the volume turned up. And, I kind of always felt that way. That's what I was in Ring of Honor. That's what I was in PWG. That's what I was on the Indies for years. And when I got here, I just didn't know if that's what they wanted. Once I got the feeling that is what they wanted, I went in head first and never looked back,
What were your thoughts then when, you hear that you're not really a guy that Vince looks for? Vince is a body guy. I think that's what you're referring to.
I guess that's what they were referring to, right. Obviously. The point is, now it's a very different environment and a very different territory, if I may borrow the expression. You know, that we really do have guys of all sizes, all shapes, all, you know, there's the cruiserweights, there's all, you know, like everything's really changed in the last 2 years, I feel. But at that time, it still wasn't this way. You know, there had already been guys that, much like myself, were very successful, even though they weren't the kind of guys that you would expect Vince to be on board with, like Daniel Bryan. He was, you know, he probably deserves a lot of credit for people like myself and Sami Zayn and Samoa Joe being here, because he really broke down, you know, the barriers, the almost like the fake barriers that people were putting, you know what I'm putting up?
Perception.
Yeah, the perception, exactly. He really changed the perception, yes. But when I got that, you know, don't get your hopes up, what I told Canyon was really how I felt. Like, I'm up to the challenge. And I remember...
That put a chip on your shoulder?
It really didn't. Because, I
you knew you were confident in your ability.
Yeah, you know, up until that moment when, you know, the only thing that was kind of scary was, well, I don't know what my name's going to be. I don't know what they're going to... You know, what if they try to put me in this extravagant character? Like, I feel like I could make everything work, but it's really not me. You know, I'd be a lot more successful being who I am. And then once I got word of that, I really felt like I know exactly who I am. I know what works for me. And I can apply that to WWE just like I have on the Indies. I remember telling my wife, we moved to Florida in August of 2014. My son started school like a week later. So we moved him. He did kindergarten in Montreal. Then his first grade was in Florida, which is a big deal because in Canada, in Montreal, school is in French. Obviously in Florida, it's not. It's in English. And Owen, for some reason, wouldn't be okay. He didn't want to speak to me in French at home. He doesn't like it. He just doesn't like it. If I speak to him in French, he gets very uncomfortable. He's only comfortable talking in French with my mom and my dad, because that's always what he's done, you know. But then he was going to school in French, so we started to pick it up pretty good. But then we moved to Florida. I went to Florida for a year, but we didn't know that at the time. We didn't know. Like, at that time, NXT, you could be in NXT for years, you know? So, however long I'd stay in NXT, we'd be living in Florida, which meant Owen would be less and less around the French language, which probably meant he would lose his understanding and his ability to use it. So my wife was always telling me, you know, and not just that, but obviously he would make friends, you know? If we're in Florida for 2-3 years, it doesn't feel right moving back to Montreal once you get called up or whatever, because then, you know, we're asking him to leave his friends behind. He'll come back to a French school, a French environment, and that's going to be very difficult. And I told my wife, I'm like, listen, once because I really didn't want to stay in Florida. I wanted to move back home as soon as possible because I'm close to my parents. She's close to her parents. I wanted my parents to enjoy their grandkids. I wasn't okay with living in Florida for an extended period. So I don't know what made me say this, but I told her once I'm on NXT television, I'll be on the main roster in 6 months and we can move back home. And as much as she loves me, as much as she believes in me, she was always the one to say, you know, when a lot of people would tell me you'll never get to WWE, or if you do, you'll never be successful, she always told me they weren't right and I would. As much as she loved me and believed in me, she still said, well, you know, guys stay in NXT for years. Like, it's a nice thought, but come on. But then if you do the math, I started in NXT on December 11th, and May 18, I showed up on Raw, and I was called up. And that's 6 months. So it came true. So that's why when Triple H told me, you're getting called up, my first, as incredible as I felt and as you know, happy as I was, my first question was, can I move back to Canada? And I remember it probably took him, you know, it took him by surprise a little that that's the one question I had after that news. But he said, yeah, sure. So then I called my wife. I'm like, hey, guess what? We're moving back home. So Owen only had to, you know, spend a year away from the French school, and then he went right back in and picked everything back up, and now everything's good. So.
Okay, I think I know the answer to this question based on what I'm hearing. But how did Kevin Owens come about? Because you were Kevin Steen on the indie scene.
Yeah, at that time, you know, when I got signed, you know, now it's obviously changed again. But getting to keep your name wasn't a thing. Everybody was, you know, changing their names, and we went back and forth on what name we could use for a little while until eventually Triple H, I had suggested Owens something. Triple H said, well, what about Owens as a last name? you know, because obviously you're fond of Owen Hart, and you know you named your son after Owen Hart, and that name means something to you. I'm like, yeah, I like Owens as a last name for sure. Then he goes, well, what about Kevin Owens? You know, you got the KO thing,
right?
It sounds good. And I was like, oh, and even back then, just keeping your first name was unheard of. Right. I remember, so I'm like, yeah, that'd be great. He's like, all right, let me see with the legal department, and sure enough, about a week later, I got the word that was the name, which was great, and it led to a pretty funny moment with Dusty, actually, because me and Dusty had talked about what my name would be and stuff like that. So I got to the Performance Center, and somehow it had leaked online that my name was now Kevin Owens. Even though I hadn't started in NXT, there were no plans for me to start in NXT anytime soon on TV or anything. But for some reason, people knew Kevin Steen is now Kevin Owens. So I walked in, and I remember I forgot my key card that day, so I had to walk in through the front instead of the back. So I rang, and Dusty opened the door for me, because he was right in the lobby. So as I'm walking with him towards where the ring area is, he goes, Kevin Owens, huh? I'm like, yep. You like it? And he goes, nope. And as he keeps walking to his office, I'm like kind of laughing. He goes, who thought of it? And I go, Hunter. And he goes, I love it. And it just, that's Dusty. Really popped me. Hey. Nope. I love it. So it was pretty good.
No, it worked out good though, because you got the Owen part in there, Owens.
Yeah.
But also just from a merchandising stand-up, KO, knockout. I mean, there are just so many ways you can go with that.
Yeah. I mean, it just, I don't know. KO sounds it's cool.
Yeah.
KO. It sounds good. I like it, and obviously, it's funny because before I got there, there was Cassius Ohno in NXT. And then he got released. I came in, I took the KO, and now he's back. So we've got KO and KO going. He's in NXT for now, but who knows what's going to happen in the future? Might have to battle over the initials there.
The seniority is going to rule that decision.